This video will look at how to set up freight rules for a supplier. So firstly we go to Merchant and then Products, and then from the Supplier drop down we click Supplier List. From here we then open up the supplier's record by clicking on the yellow magnifying glass. Then at the top of the page we click the Freight Rules button. So from here we can see a list of any existing freight rules for the supplier that we were looking at. We can then filter down the results further by entering either a keyword, a specific postcode, a shipping weight, a supply price, a date, and we can also choose to show inactive results. We can then edit an existing rule by clicking the green tick icon. We can delete one by clicking the red cross. To create a new rule, we click Create on the right hand side. So the first field we need to fill out is the display name. So we need to give all freight rules a name so that we can easily identify them in the results on the search page. So we do recommend that you give some consideration to the naming conventions you wish to use for this, because as the list of freight rules grows, it will be a lot easier to manage and locate the correct rules if you've given them a good name. So the next option is the supplier that the rule is going to apply to. So by default the supplier that we were previously looking at will be populated, otherwise we can also change it if we wish to. We can then turn a freight rule on or off by ticking or unticking the active field. So the next option is the priority. So we give all freight rules a priority, and this can sometimes be a point of confusion for customers because they assume that the priority means if there's two freight rules that are applicable, whichever one has the highest priority will take precedence, meaning that a more expensive freight rule could be enforced. However, that's not what the priority is actually designed for. The system will always attempt to give the customer the cheapest option, but where the priority does come into effect is when there's two freight rules that have been set up with the same price and you wish to give one of those preference. So for example, if we had two different freight rules using two different couriers, we could then give one of them the default option to be enforced over the other one. We then move into the charges section. So the first one here is the base charge. So for example, if we were to put in $10 there, and then we have a base weight allowance. So if for example we say 5 kilos, what this means is for any products on the order they will incur a $10 charge up until 5 kilos, and then we can say for every kilo over that it then incurs an additional $5. So we then move into the restrictions for the freight rule. So the first option is the postcode range. So we can define different freight rules for different locations within the country. We then have a weight limit. What this means is we can potentially set up different freight rules for different weight limits. So here we're saying this particular charge is applicable for products up to 10 kilos, and then anything over that could then default to a completely different freight rule which might be a lot more expensive. We can then set date ranges that the freight rule is applicable to, and then we can also restrict it to a particular price range on the order. And then lastly, once you're happy with the details that you've entered, you just click Save to create the freight rule.